Well, look, I'm massively grateful to be invited here, and only sorry, it's a bit of a fleeting visit, really. As you know, this is kind of my second home, and just an absolute honour to present the awards that I just have to Frank, the Wearside team, and to Meg, and to present the award in Francis's name kind of reminds me of the many encounters with Francis, but one in particular when in my third year at university, in my slug-ridden, freezing cold, damp dwellings just off Arthur's Hill in Fenham, one of my flatmates answered the phone. There's a woman on the phone to you. I said, a girl? Not a woman. and it was the Francis Footwood phone call that started everything in many ways. So Tim, we're desperate. It's either South Shields or North West Durham. Which one would you want? And I said, South Shields. I said that'll be easier to get to, and so I went to talk to South Shields. But even a party as far behind as we were then in South Shields didn't want to be lumbered with a 21-year-old. And so I ended up in North West Durham and standing on the same ballot paper as Theresa May, and the rest is, as I say, history. And it's been, well, a historic week, I guess. I mean, you kind of run out of superlatives to use, and various kind of analogies that you can draw. It's been a crazy week, and so I stayed up ludicrously late on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning for the American election, and then on Wednesday evening, having had 2 or 3 hours sleep, and what sleep I had was pretty fitful, on the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I stopped off 2 stops before home in the Lakes to go to Preston, where my dad still lives, and where he's the caretaker of a local comprehensive. And I was asked by him, so it was a bit of a treat, not a treat at all, but a bit of a favour to him, to speak at the awards evening at his school. And it was an unusual awards evening in the sense that they invite all of the last year's Year 11s, whether they've got an award or not, and none of them know in advance, which I always think is a bit cruel, frankly. And at the end of the awards evening, it's obviously very traditional for the guest speaker to get up and enforce upon the poor kids and their parents and the teachers, the benefit of their frankly irrelevant, tedious and poorly informed advice. And I'm a great believer in traditions, that's what I did. And I remember in particular, I guess, in the light of what had just happened in the previous few hours, I focused really on the 75–80% of kids there who'd not got an award. And the sense that, there's good news and there's bad news out there. The bad news is that your successes are temporary. And the good news is, so are your defeats, so are your disappointments. And it's what you do next that absolutely counts. And it's entirely possible, following Brexit, seeing what's happening in France, other parts of the world, what's happened on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning in the United States, to believe that somehow all reason has left the building, and that we face the greatest threat to liberalism in certainly a couple of generations, if not in living memory. And that might be the case. That might be the case. But the defeat of liberalism, the defeat of reason, of moderation, of sensible politics, is not inevitable. You see, for every Trump, you see a Trudeau. You see the possibility of making sure that people who connect with the people are the right people, rather than the wrong people. The notion that somehow this is an inevitable decline and that liberalism is defeated is utter nonsense. Liberalism has been given a wake-up call, but maybe what has been given a wake-up call wasn't liberalism in the first place. Maybe it was a kind of mushy managerial moderation that never blessed anybody or benefited anybody. And the idea that somehow we are the establishment is an absolute nonsense, and always was. So yes, liberalism is under threat, but it's never ever been more needed, more necessary. And the stark relief between that kind of Trump-esque, that Brexit-esque, that Le Pen-esque populism on one hand, and the forces of liberalism and reason on the other, that stark division couldn't be more clear. And it means in our context, in this country, the role and the importance of the Liberal Democrats has never been greater. You matter more than you ever have, probably, in our political lifetimes. And it's not just us who think that. I mean, the defeat a year last May was devastating, but you have seen what's happened in the last few months to our fortunes. I don't just mean in the local elections in May with fantastic results like the one we've just been celebrating, but in the council by-elections since then, and indeed seeing since the general election an almost doubling of our membership of people who joined because they're passionate and they agree with us. And that tells you that there is something out there. The Witney by-election tells you something special as well. You start in 4th place and you move up to 2nd and you increase your vote 5-fold. In a place which is so true blue you could barely describe it any more than that, it tells you there's something going on. And the feeling that we got on the doorsteps of Witney, and many of you were there and I'm really grateful, reminds us that what we're seeing now is an appetite for the kind of reasonable liberal politics that we stand for an opposition to the Tories that is rational and sensible and is determined to win. So look, Witney was a fantastic result. The elections that we've had in the last few weeks and months have been hugely encouraging, but it's all on Richmond Park now. I say all on Richmond Park, obviously Blakelaw matters too. As somebody who tramped the streets for Jerry Keating in the late 80s, early 90s, and was there the day he held on in the poll tax year. And for those of you who don't know, that was the year Labour won everything, absolutely everything, certainly everything that they had any chance of winning. And Jerry, against all the odds, won by 75 votes after the 3rd recount. So Blakelaw matters to me. You did a brilliant job, Kieran and team, in the election that you just had, and it just so happens you get another crack at it. And the thing to remember is you start off now where you finished off in the by-election in September, not where you started off at the beginning of that campaign. So we expect great things there, and that's why after this, if you've not gone to help in the postal vote weekend in Blakelaw, then you jolly well should, whether it's light or dark. I would say this though, that the Richmond Park by-election has the ability to be utterly transformational. Sarah Olney is our candidate there, is an outstanding candidate, will be our first woman MP of this Parliament if she is elected, incredibly electable, incredibly energetic and doing a really brilliant job, and she deserves your help. Those of you who've been will know this, but my analysis is that my early visits to Richmond Park, the chat was about Heathrow. My recent visits, no one's talking about Heathrow. It's all about Brexit. It's all about the single market, and to a lesser extent, but also hugely important, the state and local services, in particular the health service. Because the reality is we discover this to our cost sometimes. You know, Zach Goldsmith says the election's about Heathrow. I'm afraid if you're the candidate, you don't get to decide what the election's about. That's up to the electorate. They decide that. And what's happened in the last few weeks is clearly a movement to people realising they can make an enormous difference. Heathrow is not unimportant. And it's just a reminder to us, the Conservatives saying yes to Heathrow expansion, of what they really mean by the Northern Powerhouse, which is nothing really. Because for all the arguments for or against Heathrow, there are strong arguments for airport expansion, in my humble opinion. But it is just a reminder that those around the Conservatives in Westminster and Whitehall feel that all that really matters is investment further in London in the South East. And the Northern Powerhouse is really just a slogan. We need to make it a lot more than that. The Northern Powerhouse does not feature as a major issue in the Richmond Park by-election. But I can tell you that the evidence so far, the lie of the land, and I'll know more when I'm there this evening, you've got the Green Party and the Women's Equality Party, both choosing not to stand candidates and to back Sarah in this election. That is hugely significant. I would say not as significant, not quite as significant, as UKIP choosing to back Zach, because that frames that election perfectly. So I just want to encourage you, get down there. Whatever, I know we're a long way from Richmond Park, that's where I'm going next. I want you to get there, because this could be utterly transformational, not just to our fortunes, but for the whole country. It could change the direction of travel for our government in its decisions over Brexit, and that choice of the people of Richmond could massively affect the choice that is made by our government that affects us over the next half a century. So the people of Richmond face a choice, and the Prime Minister appears to have made one. And it is to decide to give in to the forces of nationalism and protectionism that have taken over her party, just as much as momentum have taken over the Labour Party. And if you look at the rhetoric that came out of their conference just a few weeks ago, and the actions that they're pursuing at the moment, almost certainly exit from the single market. Don't buy the nonsense that we might have access to the single market. North Korea and Zimbabwe have got access to the single market. It's about membership of the single market. and the consequences for the people of this region and every part of the United Kingdom if we find ourselves out of it. The shambles, and yet a dictatorial shambles, that the Conservative government find themselves in is a massive threat to every part of the United Kingdom, but particularly those that know what it's like to suffer in terms of recession and challenge to our industries like the North East and indeed the wider north of England. We saw the High Court decision just over a week ago to say that Parliament should be sovereign, something I thought the Leavers had been calling for over Article 50. So we saw that decision. We saw the absolutely shameful attack on independent judges by some in the media, which was something that they should be absolutely called out for. We saw our government completely complicit in their cowardice in not standing up to the right-wing media that chose to traduce independent judges and call them enemies of the state. Utterly despicable. I argue that some of these people, by the way, are not interested in taking us back to the 1950s. This sounds very much like the 1930s. But and then you see next Nigel Farage about to march upon the Supreme Court. So, frankly, whilst people might be selling sterling, if I were you, I would be buying shares in pitchforks and flaming torches. But this is the way we conduct democracy. All I can say is that there's something delicious about the possibility that at the Supreme Court, the government and the Brexiteers might indeed go to the European Court. And I almost hope and pray, it's bad of me, this, I think it is bad of me, but never mind, I kind of almost hope that they win at the European Court of Justice. The kind of spinning heads and the cognitive dissonance will probably fuel the national grid with clean energy for many, many years to come. But that's the world that we find ourselves in. I mean, our position is very, very clear. Our position is really clear. That if you started this process with democracy, you may not like referenda, you may think that they are the last vestige of the despot, you might think we should not be here, but we are here. The referendum that decided upon departure took place at the end of June. How dare you now refuse the British people a say on destination? The notion that the British people voted for any one of the umpteen different options on the table for the UK's relationship with the European Union is frankly laughable. It was summed up by Stephen Phillips, Conservative MP, very decent guy, absolutely convinced as a Brexiteer. He voted and campaigned for leave in June. He resigned from Parliament just over a week ago because he said, I voted to leave the European Union, I did not vote to leave the single market. I can tell you countless people I spoke to in Witney who voted leave in June and Liberal Democrat last month. Why? Because they did not believe they're given Theresa May a mandate to take us out of the single market. So you might tell me, well, I voted out and it means out of the single market. Good for you. I'm glad you think that. I reckon there's at least 8 million people out there who voted leave who disagree with you. How dare you impose your will on the will of the British people? So what began with democracy must not now end with a stitch-up. The kind of irony of what the British people will have to live with for the next 50 years being something that is the product of a stitch-up between David Davis and Brussels bureaucrats. The likes of Farron defending the Brussels bureaucrats. That's who will decide our future relationship with our neighbours, not you, not me, not the electorate. So we are absolutely convinced that you make a red line of saying that if you respect the will of the people in June, you respect the will of the people at the end also. And we will take the grief that we will get for that because somebody has to say the right thing. Absolutely. Reflection. I mean, many of you have had discussions and debates with people who are opposed to us being in the European Union, and I completely respect people who hold different views to mine, by the way. That's something we really need to learn to do better in this country, and that is to disagree decently. But I think that it's worth bearing in mind that the phrase I've heard most often from people who are opposed to us being in Europe over the last few years has been words to the effect of, I voted to be in the common market in 1975, not to be in the European Union. Fair enough. The exact opposite is now 100% the case. On the 23rd of June, people voted to leave the European Union. How dare you assume they voted to leave the common market? That question was not on the ballot paper. And this concept, I absolutely resent, by the way, my vocabulary being polluted by new words that I have nothing to do with. I don't like the phrase Brexit, whether I was for it or against it. What the heck does that mean? I particularly hate the phrase hard or soft Brexit. But there it is out there. And I just say this, I mean, if we had won with 51.9% of the vote, rather than having lost by with 48.1% of it. Do you think those of us who voted Remain would have been entitled to impose a hard Remain on the British people? Just imagine what a hard Remain might have looked like. I've actually been joining the Euro, signing Schengen, having Ode to Joy as our national anthem, and all of us having to speak Esperanto. There will be some people in this room, maybe Fiona, I don't know, think that's a bad thing, we should be doing those things. But in any event, I'm sorry Fiona, if we'd voted narrowly to Remain, then it would be that kind of compromised, modest, twin-track approach to Europe that we have had up until now. The same applies. If you win a referendum narrowly, you don't have the right to impose something that nobody voted for on the whole of the British people. The threat to business is massive, absolutely colossal. We think something like a 10% reduction in growth over the next 10 to 15 years. Our economy has shrunk from being the 5th to the 6th largest just in the last few months. And if you look already at little indicators that real estate prices in Frankfurt have gone up 20% in the last 4 months because of all the banks looking to move there. They will be clever, they will take their time, they're hoping for a soft Brexit, so the big guys won't make very many moves just yet. But you look at the fintech companies who are completely fleet of foot, innovative, at the moment almost exclusively British industry. They're all of them hot-footing into Frankfurt, to Paris, to Amsterdam, to Dublin, to other places to make their living. This is not Project Fear, it's Project Colossal Understatement. And understanding that and what it means for business means that our government has made a choice. It's made a choice. Theresa May has made a choice to pander to the people who applaud her when she says businesses must print their lists of foreign workers, to applaud her when they say that, when she says that schools must ask parents for evidence their children were born in Britain or otherwise. Applaud her when pregnant women have to hand over their passports to get into the maternity ward. Those are the people that Theresa May is now playing to. It's not that pragmatic business community the Tories once made a pitch for. So let me be very, very clear. Theresa May has made a choice to ignore pragmatic centre-right politics and the sensible business politics that we expect from a government of our country. Then business in Britain has to make a choice too. And it's this. You either go along with those people, and bear in mind that if you are a business, small or large, that is paying a penny into the Tories' coffers now, you are funding your own funerals, or you back the only pro-business, only pro-market, only pro-free trade party in town. Businesses need to back the Liberal Democrats. And then there's the Labour Party. It's all going really well. I mean, you know, as you know, once upon a time, I would spend, most days sort of going into this union building over at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne there, normally riding the gauntlets of 3 or 4 earnest chaps in long trench coats trying to sell me a newspaper of one kind or another outside the union building. Those people run the Labour Party now. And the Labour Party has chosen Jeremy Corbyn, and Jeremy Corbyn, I get on fine with him when I see him. It'll be all I can do tomorrow at the Remembrance Service to not go like this, see if he's singing the National Anthem. But, I absolutely get him, and I know him reasonably well. Like I say, during the Blair years, he was always in our lobby. The Labour's choice of Jeremy Corbyn, not once but twice, is Labour's choice to shuffle off the field of serious politics. And let's not blame Corbyn et al. For incompetence. They're not incompetent, they've just got a different agenda. The democratic process of winning elections are a bourgeois distraction. It's something that's not relevant to you. If you've got a bigger view, I respect that. But I also massively disagree with it. Because I tell you what, there's a lot of language of betrayal used on the far left. And I tell you this, if you care about refugees, you care about people who are waiting for months to get a mental health appointment. You care about the crumbling nature of our NHS. You care about people in desperate housing need. And you choose to make yourself the most unelectable opposition in living memory. You betray those people. I believe there's nothing dirty or wrong about winning or power. That is the means by which you make a difference for those people who need you. So if Labour choose to shuffle off the field of play, we will take the rightful position that someone must to be the real alternative to the Tories.
Yeah.
We make our choices, we make our choice to be the real opposition, we make our choice to defend business interests, to fight for our place within the single market, we make the choice to stand up for our farmers who don't want access to the single market, they want membership of it, because 75% of their exports go into that European bloc. We choose to fight for the thousands of people in the North East region who contribute their taxes, who are part of our culture and our communities, who are European Union citizens. We demand that they have the right to remain. We make our choices and we will stick by them. The opposition, though, as you have seen in recent weeks, will try to silence you. They are already trying to silence us. John Stuart Mill talked about the greatest tyranny being the tyranny of opinion, where you're just socially not allowed to think something. The idea that somehow we have to wind our neck in and stop fighting our corner, that we've got to stop being a whinging liberal elite. Whinging, occasionally. Liberal, always. Elite, who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? Britain has been for some time, and most undoubtedly now for certain, is in the control of an evidence-averse nationalist elite. And we must be the liberal insurgency that stands up to it and defeats it. There will be no rolling over for the Liberal Democrats. Somebody has to fight the corner of reason and common sense. And if you look at what's happened since the referendum, and I went to the Polish Centre last week for the London conference that had been attacked the week after the referendum result. And when I went there in June to visit the centre after that appalling attack post-referendum, where there'd been hate graffiti written all over that building, a building that had been there since the Second World War, since a community that predates the Second World War. I saw loads of cards and flowers from lots of people, and the ones that touched me the most were those from people who said they had voted Leave, people had not done this in their name. And it is important to remember, there's a lot of people talking about the 52 and the 48. We are the 100%. Because this is not a country that can be built and go forward if we are a nation divided. We will not stand if that is the case. And there is no doubt that those people who voted Leave in our communities predominantly did so for reasons we disagree with, but reasons that we respect. But there is no doubt whatsoever either that the referendum may have revealed tensions and hatred. It also may have fueled them. If you stand in front of that despicable breaking point poster, like Nigel Farage did the week before the referendum, don't expect that people don't hear the messages that you got across and act upon them. My great worry about Trump, by the way, I'm entirely prepared to believe that Trump will end up swallowing most things he said and act as a reasonably, centrist, vaguely sensible kind of president. It's entirely possible. It's probably the best option that's out there. But he can't unsay the things he said. He can't unsay the things he said that made millions of Americans choose to vote for that kind of bigotry. And the reality is, whatever happens going forward, the things that were said cannot be unsaid. And the hate crimes, 43% increase in hate crimes, the sense of people, in my community, you probably know, is one of the most ethnically undiverse in the country. But actually, I can tell you that one of the primary schools in my patch, in the heart of the Lakes, 60 of the 80 kids at the end of last year were from East European families. I tell you that number has gone down to 50 out of 70 just since June, because 3 or 4 families have just chosen to believe Britain's not for us anymore. No rules have changed, no rights have changed, but the mood has changed. Not in the community they live in, but in the country as a whole. That should make us all ashamed to be British, however we voted. Absolutely and utterly ashamed. So I'm going to argue, with all the things that Theresa May is doing, UKIP could just cancel their leadership election now. They don't need a new leader. They've got one, and she's called Theresa May. And we find ourselves now, as I say, in a Britain that I believe could be so much better. I am proud of being British, and I'm therefore ashamed when people make me feel ashamed of the way our country stands and how it goes forward. I mean, she spoke, Theresa May, some years ago, quite laudably, jabbing the finger at the Tory faithful, saying the Tory party had become the nasty party. And the sad reality is that over these last few months, she's become the leader of it and made it nastier than it was to start off with. And I don't think, by the way, Theresa May is an especially bad person. I think Theresa May is somebody who's a grown-up. I think Theresa May is somebody who I disagree with on many issues, but she's fundamentally a decent person. But she has been utterly weak in the face of the Tory momentum group, the right-wing English nationalists who care nothing about business, nothing about our relationship with the outside world, and who act in a way which compromises all that is fundamental about British values. Theresa May, if she shows some backbone to those people, she will have my support. If she doesn't, we will take her on, because Britain needs an opposition that will challenge the Conservatives on those things. And she chooses division, therefore. In order to try and unite her party, she chooses to divide the country. And that division is seen in so many other ways, as well as on the whole Brexit issue and the issues of migration and trade.